Good morning. Let me see if I can get this one turned on. I'm not a wanderer up here, so I'll just use this one. Some like to go back and forth, and I've got to stay by my notes. Sorry. Well, this one's going to be real short because Vicki already had my sermon. And that was a great story, a great lead-in. But the talk today is about outlook. And, you know, we've been through a wonderful little series up here, Creation Health. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. There is so much science in that thick book, heavy book, Creation Health. If some of you don't have that book, you need to acquire it. I've read it over and over on some of these chapters, but it's excellent. You know, it's interesting how science matches what we in our day sort of know, but I'm going to tell you something that happened in the past before we end that confirms what happened in the past as far as advice we've had. Who wouldn't want a healthier life? You know, we want to live life to the fullest. It says our seminar theme is living life to the fullest, and that's, you know, according to John 10:10. Is there anything that you would like to do more than to have a healthier, happier, joyful life? I mean, that's all we require, isn't it? And what we want in our peace of mind. Heaven's going to be like that, by the way. But we're going to learn some things we can do here on earth. You know, Outlook is the 7th letter in the Creation Health acronym. When I was up in the nursery this morning, some of the girls were talking about health issues, and I shared some of this with them. It's fresh on my mind, and it was apropos to their need for the day. Some of the ladies up there. But you know, we're going to teach us how to restore our health even. You know, we don't have a choice of who we are, our genetics, etc. But we do make choices that sometimes help us to live happier, healthier lives. And we're going to talk about some of those. An optimist is one who gets the most out of life, it seems. It is essential to health to have happiness and abundance. We have to be an optimist, it seems like, from Vicky's story at least. A negative outlook turns off the lights of hope. Change comes actually from love to hate, peace to stress. But a positive outlook does just the opposite. It brings hope. It ignites love for each other. During the presentation, we're going to be talking about an optimistic outlook. Living with a positive approach impacts our life and how it does. I found some quotes from the past, and one of them's in your bulletin that we started with on this back on when we did the seminar, Creation Health. And it was Henry Ford's. It says, think you can, think you can't. In both cases, you're right. What happens up here is what we're going to do usually. A couple of others. I love church signs and old quotes. But it says, our attitude determines our altitude. You know, if you think you're going to get higher and higher and you're climbing up the mountain, you will. If you think, no, it's as high as I can go, you're probably going to go back down. Another one is attitudes are contagious. Are yours worth catching? Makes you think, doesn't it? Another one, without change in our course, there's not going to be a change in our destination. Some of us have veered off course, and I'm going to tell you a little more about that next week. I veered off course. Some of us veered off course, and we have to redirect our lives some. But like I mentioned, sometimes God allows U-turns. Another church sign. I love church signs. Nathan's trying to help me from down there, and that's going to be hard because I'm not as talented as some that can run the computer and all that and do all of this too. Some just have a gift. It says every thought either pulls us toward God, love, joy, hope, blessings, and peace, an opportunity or away from God. With a positive outlook, you'll be able to see the true riches that fill your life. You will multiply your God-given talents. A person with an optimistic outlook is the kind of person who does not accept failure. I love that. He or she searches for solutions and remains committed to their worthy aims and goals. You can't keep a good man down. That applies for you women too.
Thank you.
Happy and successful people are people who have chosen to live with optimistic attitudes despite their challenges. Catch that last little phrase there. Despite their challenges. I've had people in the office that have awful disabilities, and yet they're still happy and smiling and contented. You say, how can they be such? But it's amazing. It's what we choose to do. When we choose an optimistic outlook, we dramatically increase our chances for success. There we go, the altitude thing. As a man thinks, so is he. Proverbs 23:7. Got to be careful about our thinking. A person with an optimistic outlook is the kind of person who celebrates what's right with the world. Having and maintaining this kind of attitude is a powerful life-shaping force. This is the kind of person whose life is filled with peace and joy because of their implicit trust in God. Can you believe that? It's not in themselves or their bank account, because of their implicit trust in God. You, what is your attitude like? Are you anxious? Or are you worried? Do you lean toward optimism, I hope? If not, I'm going to shove you a little bit today. We're going to lean you a little more toward optimism. Any negative energy, including fear, anxiety, depression, can affect you emotionally, physically, spiritually, and socially. Think about that. That pretty much covers our human experience, doesn't it? An optimist is the human personification of spring. Don't you love spring? You know, you go through all the dead grass and the miserable weather sometimes, cloudy, etc., and suddenly there's grass growing, and, you know, flowers are blooming and the trees are budding, etc. Each of us can become an optimist because a positive outlook is a gift we give to ourselves. One of the many benefits that come from choosing to be optimistic is the increase in the body's cells that fight off disease. Some natural killer cells. We'll talk about those and others in a bit. Well, why not now? Proverbs 17:22. You don't have that, Nathan. This says, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. Some translations put it a little different. I wondered what in the world that meant for years and years. I'd read that and say, what do you mean? And then a sorrowful spirit drieth the bones? How could that make any sense? But I went to a medical conference several years ago, probably 25 now. And this doctor had been studying this immune system for 20 years. And he said, you know, guess what? We've done studies and we have people that watch funny videos, etc. We check their blood before, we check it after, we check it the next day. But it literally increases your immunity. And guess where immunity comes from? Your bone marrow. So a sorrowful spirit drieth the bones. But laughter, and we'll talk about that a little later, it actually helps us to have better immune system. Antibodies that can fight off infections. Natural killer cells, they're like the Marines. They're the first ones on the front, many times, in fighting the enemy. They gobble them up. Natural killer cells, almost like the old Pac-Man game. Gobble up the bacteria. I'm going to read a little of this. It's pretty interesting. Oh, I didn't know it was there. Thank you. I put my book on the bar. Don't put your book on the bar when you're up here. Attitude determines how a person views their own health. For example, according to several studies done over the past few years, the answer people give to this simple question. Now think of it in your mind. For your age, would you say in general that your health is excellent, good, fair, poor, or bad? Is a better predictor of who will live or die over the next 10 years than are the in-depth physical exams and extensive laboratory tests. So Dr. Corrigan and I have been wasting our time a lot doing all this stuff. We just need to ask them what they think their health is. Now continue to listen. People who perceive their health as excellent were as many as 6 times less likely to die than those who perceive their health to be poor. The results of this study are consistent with the results of 5 other large studies that involve more than 23,000 people ranging in age from 19 to 94. How do you feel you are? How man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Amazing stuff God put into us. Our own opinion about the state of our health is a better predictor than objective factors such as physicals, extensive exams, laboratory tests, or behaviors such as cigarette smoking. You know, Dr. Corrigan mentioned even that, exercise. If we're not exercising and we're not a smoker that is exercising has a better chance of living a longer life. Isn't that astounding? Our own opinion about the state of our health is a very good predictor. And then it goes into things here. It says, studies also show that using your mind to imagine the body healing itself can aid the healing process. Little kids have wonderful imaginations, but don't lose that. This is referred to as imagery. An example might be imagining your immune system cells attacking cancer cells. In this situation, you're imagining that your body is working a certain way. You have a perception that it is working a certain way, and therefore it does work that way. Imagery, imagining in our minds. You know, some people, well, it's in the spirit of prophecy even. If you think you're going to get sick, you probably will. If you think you're not going to get sick, you won't. You know, I mean, mind over matter. It says it even helps with chronic and acute pain. Stress can also aid in rehabilitation and problem solving. Also helps suffering and anxiety and depression. Imagining yourself healthy and well. Isn't that amazing? Listen to this one. According to Herbert Benson in his book, Timeless Healing, The Power and the Biology of Belief, it has been shown that there's a vital link between religious faith and health. The benefits include improved general health, increased survival, reduced alcohol, cigarette, and drug use, reduced general and death anxiety, reduced depression and hostility, reduced blood pressure, and improved quality of life for patients with cancer and heart disease, and improved psychological symptoms, including adjusting and coping. The benefits also include an increase in life and in marital satisfaction, in increased well-being, and self-esteem. Now, what was that all about? Religious faith. Even the secular world is grabbing onto that now, literally. Not religious institutions are asking their resident doctors to pray with patients, etc., to utilize God in their talking with people. And they're probably doing it from a financial benefit. They literally get out of the hospital earlier from surgery, etc. But your faith, glad you're here. To spread this to those that aren't here today. You know, our faith helps us. It all begins in our minds. Watch your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. Watch your habits, they become your character, who you are. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny. Think about those. Words become actions, actions become habits, habits become character. Our character determines where we're going to end up. Because our thoughts shape who we are, it's vitally important that we choose carefully what we allow to enter into our minds. By beholding, we become changed. If I gave you a glass of water and it had all kinds of trash in it and it was sort of grimy and maybe greenish, would you be eager to drink that? Maybe if you were in the desert and it's been 2 days or something, but you'd want me to put it through one of my pure filters or something, wouldn't you? Well, I'm going to ask you to look up this pure filter. Philippians 4:8, if you have your Bible. Philippians 4:8. We would do well to examine all of life, what we watch, who we listen and talk to and absorb things from, etc., etc. Filter all this through Philippians 4:8. Does someone have that they can read out? Go ahead, Alvin.
Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things.
I hope you can hear that, but we're supposed to think about things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, of good report. If there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Well, when I put through some of the things that I am exposed to, billboards, magazines, TV programs, internet, filter these things with that text. It affects our mind. It affects our mind whether we realize it or not. Researchers' analysis of the survival rate among 839 medical students through a 30-year period showed that an optimistic style was associated with a 50% decrease in the risk of mortality or early death compared to those that were not. 50% improvement with optimism as far as just dying. Optimists enjoyed a decreased bodily pain and role limitations due to emotional and physical problems, increased physical functioning and vitality, increased general health perception, increased social functioning and health. This goes into pessimism. And I'm not going to dwell a long time on it, but overall, a pessimist feels that he or she does not have control over the events of his or her life. They feel like they're not in control. How would you feel if you were in the river leading down to Niagara Falls in a canoe and you lost your paddle? It wouldn't be a very good feeling. That's a rapid river and it's a long fall. But pessimists, that's where they live. That's where they live the majority of their life, thinking that there's no hope, they're doomed. Hardly hear a positive word out of pessimist. But we need to think positive, don't we? Consider positive thinking. Optimistic outlook. Overall, optimists tend to have feelings of control over their own lives. Dr. Seligman states in his book, Learning Optimism, that becoming an optimist consists not of learning to be more selfish and self-assertive and to present yourself in overbearing ways. That's the way of the world, isn't it? Teaching some of their people to build up and up and up on the ladder of control over the company. But simply of learning a skill set of how to talk to yourself when you suffer personal defeat. My mother and dad would always tell me, if at first you don't succeed, what do? I'm glad you had parents that way too. You know, you don't give up. You don't give up. You keep on trying. In his book, Dr. Seligman again states in this book that over and over above their talent test scores, we repeatedly find that pessimists drop below their potential and optimists exceed theirs. I have come to think that the notion of potential without the notion of optimism has very little meaning. Now, that's an interesting statement there. Some people have lots of potential. They don't realize it. They're thinking negative. The great news is Dr. Seligman and others have found that we can change our style. We can become optimistic. And in doing so, we can avoid or recover from one of the nation's leading causes of disability. And that starts with a D, called depression. You know, I'm guessing some degrees of depression are ubiquitous. Everybody, you know, at times may feel down and out to some degree, or hopeless perhaps. But we don't have to stay there. When I counsel smokers, back in the 1980s, we did a lot of that. But we were handed buttons from the American Cancer Society to give to them. I choose not to smoke. Even if they're coming out of work and someone offers them a cigarette and they're halfway through the cigarette before they remember, I quit smoking a week ago. But it's a habit. Well, you don't feel like a dirty rat. You don't have to go buy a whole carton of cigarettes because you failed, etc. I choose not to smoke. So do those kinds of things. I choose optimism. I choose optimism. Choose to be positive about life. Healthcare cost. This study, you can see this study of older adults found that patients with significant depression symptoms had total healthcare costs that were roughly 50% more. Don't you love paying for medical bills and hospital visits and ERs? No. Well, there's a reason. And a reason that you can change some things and not be there as much. If we choose to focus on the negative in life, we tend to have worries and fears. Worry is unhealthy, a fact that is illustrated in this 20-year study of 1,759 people looking at the connection between worry and heart attack. As the level of worry went up, so did the relative risk of heart attack. Those with a moderate level of worry had almost twice the risk, while those with the highest level of worry had 2.5 times the risk of heart attack. That's 250% increase. Again, some more good news that we can change. Drugs relieve depression, but only temporarily. Unlike cognitive therapy, drugs fail to change the underlying pessimism, which is the root of the problem. There are good medicines for depression, but many, many times when people come back and are still depressed, we need to work on this underlying problem here. We need to plant God in the middle of their life too. He's the eternal optimist. He still believes in all of us, no matter how bad we've been. I'm going to skip down here just a bit, just due to our time. Now, Dennis, turn your watch off, man. Dr. Herbert Benson, in his book Timeless Healing, states that 60 to 90% of all doctor visits are for conditions for which no physiologic basis can be found. That means physical kind of basis. Much less treated effectively with the procedures and medications that the medical profession currently relies on almost exclusively. Specialists in psychophysiologic medicine, so brain and body, medicine estimate that possibly as much as 90% of all the problems with our health can be traced at least in part to the influence of our emotions, of our brain, the influence of our brain. Mind over matter. Remember that 90%. Laughter is good for your outlook and your heart. In fact, researchers found that laughter may help a person who has already had a heart attack. In this study, 24 cardiac rehabilitation patients watched 30-minute humorous videos every day for a year. During the same period, other cardiac patients didn't watch such videos. In those who watched the videos, only 2 had subsequent heart attacks, compared to 10 in the other group. Now, this was a small group, 24 cardiac rehab patients. Amazing statistics still. 5 times more in those that didn't have much humor in their life. You'll like this picture. Some kids you just cannot help but laugh with them. You hear them giggle. And I should have brought that little thing we have in the bedroom. Somebody gave us a little toy that you push a button and it giggles. I forget what it's called, but you cannot stand there and just listen to it. You have to giggle with them. This says adults average 15 laughs a day. Children laugh 400 times a day. Somewhere between childhood and adulthood, we lose 385 laughs a day.
Oh, that's sad.
Isn't it though? May we each make a conscious choice to see the brighter side of life and laugh often. We become cynical, When we choose to see the fun and the humor in life, we are more optimistic and feel better because of humor's healing effects. For those times, though, when we find ourselves in darker, more challenging situations, there's another powerful tool we can use to remain optimistic. It's called hope. Hope is one of God's greatest gifts for energizing the human spirit. You just get one slide, and I get a whole bunch here, but I'm going to summarize a little bit of this. 2 doctors had done studies on cancer, and this was in metastatic lung cancer. They were both given the same drugs to treat this, and they were etoposide, platinol, oncovin, and hydroxyurea. These 2 doctors were talking before they were to give their lectures that morning. And one doctor said, "Bob, I used the same drugs as you used. We had the same protocol. Our patients were chosen with the same criteria that we worked on. And yet I only get 22% success rate. And you have 74%. I don't get it. What's the difference?" And Bob said, "Well, you told your patients you were giving them EPOH." And it was. That's the first name of each drug. I tell them I'm giving them HOPE. Backwards. Okay? He says, I tell them that the results are not real good statistically. But in those that respond, they do really well. Guess where he was headed? He was working on their minds and so forth. Hope encourages us to work toward a better situation. This can happen even in the face of chronic or terminal illness. Hopelessness is devastating. A negative expectation about oneself in the future can be identified as a strong independent predictor of cardiovascular disease, morbidity, and mortality. I was just reading an article at the end of December, and it said that in our country, we spend $555 billion a year on cardiovascular disease. I don't even know how to think that high. $555 billion a year on cardiovascular disease. Well, we've just already heard some things that will reduce that 50%. You know, and I'm going to talk about some things next week that'll give you even better percentage. Let's see. The quality of interaction between the patient and the physician can be extremely influential in patient outcomes, and in some, perhaps many, cases, patient and provider expectations and interactions may be more important than the specific treatment. So I'm beginning to feel smaller and smaller and smaller up here. My job in the office is not as important as I thought. You know, as far as what you do sometimes for people. I needed to go to psychology class first, but we did get a lot of that. But how you interact with your friends, be positive and not negative, even if they're having awful times. It will give them a boost. This is something called the nocebo effect, N-O-C-E-B-O, never had heard of it. Is the causation of sickness or death by expectations of sickness and death and by associated emotional states. There is, however, substantial scientific evidence that our thoughts can negatively affect our health. Here's some examples. I'll just read a few. When asthmatic patients were given an inhaler, I said, this is for your asthma. It works pretty well, but you will feel tightness in your chest usually. Well, everybody did. And then they told them, well, what's in there is just saline, salt water, like our physiologic saline in our body. It's like you get an IV at the hospital. When a harmless look-alike plant was exposed to a person that had poison ivy allergies, they all developed a rash. But it wasn't poison ivy. Isn't that amazing? Mind over matter. The last one, a group of patients in a cancer study were given a completely benign substance and told it was a powerful anti-cancer medicine, and they'd experience hair loss. They all did. And there was nothing in it. There was no chemotherapy in it. Mind over matter. Isn't that amazing? This is science. You know, God's told us this, and we'll review a little of that in a bit. Years and years ago, mind over matter. It's amazing. I don't think we just barely scratched the surface of our willpower. Research on gratitude. Those who regularly wrote down what they were grateful for had higher levels of optimism, alertness, enthusiasm, determination, attentiveness, and energy. Were more likely to help others, exercise more regularly, make more progress toward personal goals, and have a better duration and quality of sleep, and more likely to feel loved. They had a greater sense of feeling connected to others. That's just themselves writing down what they were grateful for. We need to remind ourselves, don't we, of our blessings. In the areas of overall well-being, grateful people reported higher levels of positive emotions, life satisfaction, vitality, etc. In the area of pro-sociality, individuals with a strong disposition toward gratitude have the capacity to be empathetic, so feel other people's needs and hurts and be sympathetic with that, and take the perspective of others. They are rated as more helpful, more generous by people in their social networks. Let's go to the next one. What do you see in that line of letters up there? Someone spit it out. What do you see? What's it say? Did you see that at first? You know, it can be opportunity is nowhere, and opportunity is now here. You know, we live to choose with a positive vision of our life. We can start that today. An old quote is, opportunity is often missed because it is dressed in overalls and it looks a whole lot like work. Our young kids don't like to hear that when we tell them that old quote. Vision gives meaning and purpose for life and a positive outlook for the future. A person's positive outlook helps their vision become a reality. Without a vision or purpose, mission in life, it's difficult to live life to the fullest. I want to go over to Viktor Frankl next. He was a psychiatrist during the Nazi. I think it's back from here a little bit, Nathan, unless I missed one. Viktor Frankl. Well, you may not have it. Sorry, you may not have that one. I didn't check this one. There's a lot of writing into this one. He was a psychiatrist when the Nazis and the Germans were taking over places, and they were in concentration camps, and millions of people were being put to death. And they were having trouble with people committing suicide. He said, I'm getting out of here. There's no reason to wait until they do it. I'm going to get out of here. And anyhow, there were some positive people there, and they literally talked among themselves and say, we all have something we're looking forward to. And two men were already said they were going to commit suicide. And one of the fellows that had been talking with the positive person came and talked to that fellow and said, remember, you've got a son back home. He's waiting for you to come home. And the other one said, now you're a book writer. You almost have your book done. No one can do that but you. You lack the last chapter. Both of those men decided they would live, and they did live. And they didn't have to die in there, but positive thinking, even amidst all the horror of Auschwitz. This is a neat story, and I'll try to go quickly here. Vision of the future of a focused role image. Benjamin Singer is the one that wrote about this. Low performance students have almost no sense of their future, whereas optimists usually are thinking in time horizons of 5 to 10 years ahead of where they are now. When all successful students shared with a profound and a positive vision, what all successful students shared was a profound and positive vision of their future. And it tells the story of a man, Eugene Lang, in Harlem, New York, 1981, so not too far back. But he was talking to a school that he went to. It's called PS number 121 in Harlem. And these were sixth graders, and he was supposed to give a commencement speech. And he was sitting up there and looking out at the audience, and he was saying, you know, what I had prepared, it isn't going to mean that to them. of what I want them to hear. So he changed his whole speech. He said he talked about Martin Luther King's dream. I have a dream. And he talked about that dream and told them that everyone must have a dream. He spoke to their journey all the way to college, and then realized that these must seem unattainable to them. So he said, don't think for a minute that you can't go to college, because you can. And then he promised those sixth graders that he personally would provide each and every one of them who graduated from high school a college scholarship. Well, that's a big promise, wasn't it? But then he realized, I can't do it by myself. But he enlisted the folks, the teachers, the parents. He literally rounded folks up that could help these sixth graders develop a vision for their future, a support structure. And let me read the finishing events here. Past history predicted that of those who graduated that day, only 25%, 1 in 4, would go to graduate from high school. These are sixth graders, but predictions would say only 1 out of 4 would graduate from high school. Out of the 25%, another 25%, almost no one would go into college. But thanks to Mr. Lang and the support of others, 48 out of the 52 of those sixth graders graduated from high school. 48 out of 52. And of that 48, 40 went on to complete college. What an incredible illustration of the power of a child's vision. So all you kids out there, I hope you're listening. You too, Alexis. You know, we need a vision, and we as older folks need to not be pessimistic. When they're talking about their dreams, etc., we need to be optimistic and encourage them along the way and to think positively, even when our wise, old, cynical mind would say, that'll never happen. Maybe it will. Einstein and others, well, the lights, they were invented with many, many, many experiments and failures before they finally succeeded. We can develop a positive outlook by practicing optimism, living with vision, maintaining hope in all situations by expressing gratitude every day. Because our thoughts shape who we are, we must remember about what we're allowed to come into our minds. What was that text again? Our filter, Philippians 4, verse 8. Yeah. Look it up. Put it on your mirror for a while until it gets into your head good. It's easier to be optimistic when you remember who you are. You are a person of value. Christ died for you and promises to never leave or forsake you. What love he had for us, his rebellious children. Changing our outlook, practice optimism. That's been hard, Nathan, sorry. Keep up with this back and forth. Changing your outlook and maintaining it begins and continues by practicing what we've learned. And again, if you have this book, review it. You know, our team up here did not just happen up here today. What they do? Practiced. You know, they probably practiced many times and so forth. We can further obtain optimism by praying for peace, hope, and joy, by reading the Bible, especially God's promises in the Psalms. One of God's most powerful promises is in Isaiah 41:10. So, do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my victorious right hand. And I like 2 Timothy 1:7 also. For God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of love, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. We needed that as we were going out trying to get Bible study started. We can obtain and maintain optimism by practicing forgiveness. They throw a little bit of a kink in there, don't they? Forgiveness. One of the songs on the radio says, what's the hardest gift to give? Forgiveness. You know, we humans tend to hold grudges, and yet we're just hurting ourselves probably more than the other person most of the time, but you can relieve and have happy people on both sides with forgiveness. But it relieves some bad memories and some burdensome things that we're carrying around. Vision's power. Vision gives meaning and purpose. It offers hope and a positive outlook for the future. Look for opportunities to improve your vision and your attitude, and surround yourself with positive role models. And I won't pick on anyone here specifically today, although I could pick on a whole bunch of you as being very positive people. And one gentleman, I told him that last week, that he's a very positive person. But we all can be positive. Men or women, we can be positive. Looking around, you will find some that are always seemingly happy, even amid trials and troubles. And again, I won't embarrass anyone, but we all know people like that. Have and maintain hope in all situations. A real quick review, the summary one at the last. Yeah, the mind and the body are intimately connected. So mind over matter, remember? And now I think there's one more maybe I have you checked. That's the last one you have? Okay, let's see. Well, anyhow, I'll just summarize here. We have seen that our mind and indeed the control center of our body, our faith and belief help bring about miracles or bring us down. Our perception of our health impacts us in profound ways. When we choose to be optimistic, it impacts every other part of our life. It impacts our ability to succeed. Adding humor to our lives helps us manage everyday stress and boost our immune system. Our ability to avoid becoming depressed, or our ability to recover from depression, is powerfully impacted by our optimism or pessimism, which is our habit of thought. Our habit of thought can be changed and controlled by us. It is our choice. That is good news. You know, I'm sure all of us know pessimistic people. We just soon not be around them very long. It rubs off if you're not careful. But always end on a positive note, even though they're sad. When we embrace hope and practice gratitude, life changes for us and others. When we find and focus on our purpose in life, we can overcome obstacles and weather life storms because we have something to live for. In general, I want us to think about talking faith and hope and courage, and not the negative things of life. I want to share a few things out of the Spirit of Prophecy, which is amazing to me, and I love it. And we have had counsel for many years that we sometimes have skimmed over. This first quote is out of Mind Cures, Ministry of Healing. This was actually a textbook in medical school and college for me. It says, the condition of the mind affects the health to a far greater degree than many realize. Many of the diseases from which men suffer are the results of mental depression. Grief, anxiety, discontent, remorse, guilt, distrust all tend to break down the life forces and to invite decay and death. Disease is sometimes produced and is often greatly aggravated by the imagination. Do you remember hearing something like that in science a few minutes back? This is 1800s when this was written. Many imagine that every slight exposure will cause illness, and the evil effect is produced because it is expected. It says many die from disease, the cause of which is wholly imaginary. Now that's astounding. Then he talks about faith, hope, and courage promote health and prolong life. A contented mind, a cheerful spirit is health to the body and strength to the soul. And then it uses the text, a merry heart doeth good like a medicine. I'm going to skip over. If you need any of these references, you're welcome to them. It's page 251. Nothing tends more to promote health of body and soul than does a spirit of gratitude in praise. We just talked about gratitude, didn't we? It is a positive duty to resist melancholy, discontented thoughts and feelings as much a duty as it is to pray. It is a law of nature that our thoughts and feelings are encouraged and strengthened as we give them utterance. While words express thoughts, it's also true that thoughts follow words. I don't know when that quote about the thoughts and words and actions and all came out, but it's partially described there. I'm about done. I don't know if the praise team's still here or not, but this is about the power of the will. It is a power also in dealing with disease. Exercised in the right direction, it would control the imagination and be a potent means of resisting and overcome disease of both mind and body. There are thousands who can recover health if they will. If they will. If we use our will. Inactivity is the greatest curse that can come upon most invalids. The mind needs to be controlled, for it has a most powerful influence upon the health. The imagination often misleads and, when indulged, brings severe forms of disease upon the afflicted. Many die of diseases which are totally imaginary. It's just a different book, a different quote. And I think there's one more here. Remember the 90% we talked about? It says, Satan is the originator of disease, and the physician is warring against his work and power. Sickness of the mind prevails everywhere. 9/10 of the diseases from which men suffer have their foundation here, in our mind. 1800. Amazing what we've been blessed with from the past that applies to our future. We've learned science today. We've learned some of the spirit of prophecy that God was so kind to give us some insight into. But it's amazing how they mesh when rightly understood. So forth. Our Heavenly Father, we just thank you so much for the love that you give us. We thank you for your word. We thank you for the many things that you've given us to see what a beautiful world you originally created. Help us to do our best to maintain ourselves, our bodies, our world that we live in, the people around us in a positive atmosphere which is like you. Bless us as we go through the week, that we may honor you in all that we do. In Jesus' name, amen.